Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Hey, really glad you're with us for the Wednesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. So much to get to today. We'll be taking a look at some of the latest revelations from Biden's obvious cognitive decline that nobody cared to talk about in the mainstream media as an actual problem until after the debate. But we're going to be talking about an incident that happened shortly before that debate and became relatively famous. We'll also be talking about Trump's decision to at least announce that the U.S. would soon be lifting sanctions against Syria. And in just a moment, the grand jury indictment against that Wisconsin judge who helped a criminal illegal evade ICE just a number of weeks ago. But let's start with a different Wisconsin official, Jim, real quickly here. And that's our transportation secretary, Sean Duffy, former congressman, of course. He is touting the need for a much more modernized air traffic control system. He says they're still ordering floppy disks to run this operation in a lot of different ways. So, yeah, we definitely need to modernize. The flashpoint right now is at Newark, where they had to shut down air traffic control operations for stretches like 45 minutes at a time. He says that it's safe, that it's okay for Newark to keep operating the way it is. But we've also found out that he told conservative radio host David Webb that his wife was supposed to fly out of Newark at some point this week, and he switched her flight to LaGuardia. So I don't know that he's completely confident in Newark. So whatever's happening there, we got to get it fixed super soon and probably before this whole new operation is online.
Yeah, look, a lot of people are saying that it's, a hypocritical or a bad message for the Secretary of Transportation to be telling people, don't worry, Newark International Airport is fine, and then admitting in a radio interview that he switched his wife. It would all just make a lot more sense if he just said, I just never want my wife to go to Newark for any reason at all, because a couple of weeks ago, I generally try to avoid flying into Newark because there's two bad scenarios. Worst case scenario, there's an air traffic issue and you crash and you die. That's the worst. Second worst is you get off the plane in Newark, and that's almost as bad. Not quite, but
Jim's a New Jersey native. He can make that joke. But you really have problems no matter what you do. Because if you go to Kennedy, you're way, way out there. LaGuardia is almost always backed up badly. And now Newark's got these issues. So not a lot of great options in that part of the country. But we'll be talking about another Wisconsin official as we now have that indictment against Judge Hannah Dugan for helping out the illegal. So in the meantime, let's talk about your business. There is a growing expense eating into your company's profits. What is it? It's your cloud computing bill. You may have gotten a deal to start with, but now the spend is sky high and increasing every year. But what if you could cut your cloud bill in half and improve performance at the same time? Well, if you act by May 31st, Oracle Cloud Infrastructure can help you do just that.
OCI is the next generation cloud designed for every workload, where you can run any application, including any AI projects, faster and more securely for less. The savings are real. On average, OCI costs 50% less for computing, 70% less for storage, and 80% less for networking. Join Modal, Skydance Animation, and today's innovative AI tech companies who upgraded to OCI and saved.
That's actually lower cost. It's not like Washington, where a slight decrease in the projected increase of cost is going to happen. No. Actual decreases. This offer does end, though, May 31st, only for new U.S. customers with a minimum financial commitment. So see if you qualify for half off at oracle.com/martini. That's oracle.com/martini. All right, Jim, let's get to that Wisconsin judge. It's just a couple of weeks ago that it was the good martini that the FBI arrested and charged Judge Hannah Dugan for interfering with ICE. Those ICE officials just minding their own business outside of Dugan's courtroom while the criminal illegal was on trial for domestic violence. And apparently that wasn't a big enough deal for Judge Dugan. She helped him escape from ICE officials out the jury door. They arrested him down the street, and now she's been removed from her position pending the result of this trial. And we'll see where it all goes from here. But a federal grand jury did indict Dugan on Tuesday on charges she helped this illegal evade U.S. immigration authorities. The AP, of course, says it's escalated a clash between President Donald Trump's administration and local authorities over the Republicans' sweeping immigration crackdown. Look, like Tom Homan has said a million times, you don't have to help us, but you better get out of the way. You can't be impeding this. And the indictment not only charges her with that, but it also points out that she actually conducted the criminal illegals court proceeding off the record and then told his lawyer that he could appear via Zoom for his next court appearance so he wouldn't risk being captured by ICE. So I think we have obvious actions here and obvious intent, Jim, when it comes to this judge.
I can't help but think of my colleague, Andy McCarthy, sometimes a guest host on this program, who when this news came out was very skeptical that any serious consequence would come to Judge Dugan. Pointed out accurately, this is going to be tried in Milwaukee. You're going to have a Milwaukee jury. And apparently the judge who this case has been assigned to is, let's just say conservatives are not optimistic. This is probably a pretty good selection for that. That having been said, this is the required first step. And yes, a prosecutor can indict a ham sandwich. All they had to do was convince 12 out of the 20 people in the grand jury that, yes, a crime was committed here. But this evidence just keeps piling up. And in fact, I think jury nullification might be the only defense that, Judge Dugan has here, because it's going to be, I've never even heard of an entire proceeding being off the record. That's like, you're in a courtroom. You hear about, sidebars and, every time on Law and Order, counsel everybody in my office. The idea that they have the capacity to do off the record discussions that are not on the court record, but the entire thing just being, we're just not going to have any record of this, and then saying, well, I don't want you getting arrested for being illegally in the country, so I'm going to do this by Zoom. Like, it just piles up this ton of evidence that this judge adamantly believed that this defendant should not be deported, even though he was in the country illegally. And this is entirely separate from the crime that he allegedly committed. And that, looked like a pretty strong chance of conviction on that one, too. So we'll see how this shakes out here. Again, a required first step. Let's also point out that she has been temporarily suspended from performing her duties as a judge while this indictment is going on. We'll see how this shakes out. I wouldn't surprise me in the slightest if the Trump Justice Department's attitude was, we're going to try to make an example of her. And we will take our chances with the Milwaukee jury. We will take our chances with the judge. It might not be all that sympathetic to our perspective. We are going to, we want to demonstrate that if you attempt to interfere in the arrest of illegal immigrants, if we have any opportunity to go after you legally, we're going to do so. We will see how it shakes out. But I think this is not the way things are turning out the way Dugan would have hoped them to turn out.
Yeah, obviously with a jury in a criminal trial, you're not going to need too many defectors to derail a conviction here. But one of the things we saw in Chicago, in New York, and in other places around the country on Election Day, Kamala Harris still won those states, but they were tighter than they usually are, especially in recent elections. And one of the reasons is that people even in deep blue areas are sick of illegals being there, and especially criminal illegals. So the coddling of criminal illegals, I don't know that you would guarantee an acquittal just based on the fact that a lot of people in that neighborhood don't like Trump, but it's possible. We'll see. But getting a conviction on this in a blue area won't be easy, but I don't know that's impossible. All right. Well, one of the reasons that you've got people in maybe Milwaukee, but certainly in Washington, D.C., who like to coddle the criminal illegals, but not have much sympathy for victims of crime is because they've been taught at institutions that have everything backwards. One of the institutions that doesn't teach everything backwards is Hillsdale College. I can vouch for that personally, being a Hillsdale grad. And in addition to Hillsdale being a fantastic experience for those who are fortunate enough to be students, you can do it too. And you can do it for free. Yes, Hillsdale College has all these free online courses, and their latest one is Understanding Capitalism.
You can learn about the U.S. Constitution, the stories in the book of Genesis, the rise and fall of the Roman Republic, or the history of the ancient Christian church with Hillsdale College's free online courses. And in the Understanding Capitalism series, you'll learn about the role of profit and loss, how human nature plays a role in our economic system, and why capitalism depends upon private property rights, the rule of law, and above all, freedom.
So go right now to hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll in this course, Understanding Capitalism. There is no cost, and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/martini to enroll for free. All right, Jim, on to our second martini now, also a good, and it's a little bit of debatable good. We'll talk about all the different aspects of this debate, but President Trump is still, of course, on his Middle Eastern trip, and yesterday he was on day 2 in Saudi Arabia. He's now moved on to Qatar. While he was in Saudi Arabia, the president gave a pretty significant speech telling Iran he wanted a deal, but in order to get the deal, they're going to have to give up nuclear weapons. They're going to have to give up terrorist proxies. You got to stop funding terrorism. You got to be a responsible player in the Middle East. The other thing that made a lot of news yesterday is that the president is willing to give a shot to the brand new government in Syria by lifting sanctions.
I will be ordering the cessation of sanctions against Syria in order to give them a chance at greatness.
So, Jim, this is where the debate is on this. So you were, of course, in Syria at the end of February, early March, I believe, towards the end of that trip that started in Ukraine. And so you've got some people saying, whoa. Whether you call this guy al-Shara or al-Jalani, this is a guy who used to be ISIS, he used to be al-Nusra. We got to verify a lot before we let this guy into our good graces. We've got the sectarian violence that we saw shortly after you left. There's been more reports of his forces, the HTS as they're known, and especially the Druze, mixing it up with a lot of Druze being killed lately, Israel intervening potentially on the side of the Druze there. And so, you know, this guy hasn't proven himself to be reputable enough to lift those sanctions. On the other hand, you've got people saying, you know, this guy says he wants to be a responsible leader, a responsible nation. He wants normalized relations with Israel, which is unthinkable from Syria for all of our lives until right up to this second. And they say, well, the upside of this is that they won't be in the hip pocket of Iran or Russia, which Syria had been previously in the Assad regime. So maybe it's worth the gamble. You've obviously studied this and you've been there. What's your take?
Greg, this is one of those rare times where I will give a full attaboy to the president, and I think he's going in the right direction. Because this is Donald Trump, he has to do it in just about the weirdest way possible. And by that, I point to his comments describing Syrian President al-Shara as, quote, a young, attractive guy, tough guy, strong past, very strong past, fighter. He's got a real shot at holding it together. I spoke with President Erdogan. He was very friendly with him. He feels he's got a shot of doing a good job. It's a torn up country. Now, last statement, fact check, true. All over I went in Syria. There are some neighborhoods or you know, really whole sectors like Jobar that are just rubble. There's just nothing left. But all over the country, everywhere we were traveling, you could see buildings that had been, you know, demolished in bombings and really a 13-year civil war. Young, attractive guy. I leave this the eye of the beholder. That's not the first thing that comes to mind when I look at the Syrian president, but fine, whatever. But I think on the whole, first of all of our sanctions that we had in place on Syria were because of the actions of the Assad regime. The Assad regime is gone. Assad is now freezing his you-know-what's off in Moscow. And so my sense is if you're going to have sanctions on the Syrian government, it should be for the actions of the people actually in charge of it, not the other one. Secondly, we had like zero trade, zero economic interactions with Syria pretty much since the beginning of the Civil War. The trade between the U.S. and Syria was six figures, I want to say. We were next to nothing. So like there was about as low as it could get. 27 million in goods in 2023, right? So I think, considering how, you know, even when there are cases where I do, you know, support sanctions, ultimately they do more, you know, damage to the people than they do to the regime themselves. Regimes can almost always get what they want or need on the black market. I think this is a good step in the right direction. We're not talking about arms sales to them. We're not talking about things. We're just talking about getting back to regular. We will import stuff from you. You can buy stuff from us. We will, you know, oil purchases, you know, you're allowed to sell things to the state airline, allowed to do business with the Central Bank of Syria, things like that. I think this is all very reasonable. The Syrian Americans who were hoping for a fresh start are just absolutely ecstatic about this. This is the sort of thing that could do a lot of good for the Syrian economy. It will not surprise listeners to learn the Syrian economy, like, is probably, if not dead last in the world, it's very near dead last in the world in terms of it. They are impoverished. Just about all the infrastructure has been about as crushed as you could imagine it would be through a 13-year civil war. Should we trust this new Syrian government entirely? No. Trust but verify. I think when we have aligned interests, and by the way, I should point out, HTS and the new Syrian government have been vehemently opposed to ISIS, which is a little weird because he had been in ISIS, and before that he was in Al-Qaeda. So it's the rare kind of, you know, jihadist trifecta when you've been in two of the big ones and then you formed your own third one. But apparently it was enough of a splitting up, a falling out for them to be literally shooting at each other. They are, as you mentioned, they are open to talks, or at least, you know, trying to build a stabilized, normal relationship with Israel. Some of this is because Syria has no capacity to actually fight a war against Israel or anybody else these days. And look, is there reasons to be concerned? Is there definitely a jihadist element in Syria? Absolutely. When I was in Idlib, as I described, you were getting all kinds of strange looks as outsiders and as Westerners. There is a belief that al-Sharaa wants to be a modernist Islamist leader. If that makes you, if you're wary about that, if you're skeptical of that, I get that. Having said that, they are in charge of it. And if we're not talking to them, other people like the Russians and the Iranians will be. And I think that there's a possibility of us saying, hey, you know what? Your country has really suffered. If you guys are if you mean what you're saying, we're willing to open up to you. I'd like to see maybe the next step is something where we start reestablishing something resembling normal diplomatic relations. Their embassy here has been closed for more than a decade. Our embassy over there has been closed for more than a decade. We don't have to do this overnight, but we can just kind of gradually move in this direction if there aren't further setbacks like there was in Latakia. So a rare day of kudos, Mr. President. Good luck. And if you think he's really attractive, maybe just keep that to yourself.
Well, let's see if his leadership style is attractive and whether he's actually trying to target the minorities in his country as is being alleged. And let's see if he actually makes good on some of these promises. Time will tell on all of this stuff. I would be thrilled if this guy literally seriously denounced jihadist mentality, but I don't know that you can take his word for it. What are we, not even 6 months in since the takeover. So take it slowly is what I would certainly say. The other thing is this group he's the head of that took over, HTS. Jim, you and I have been in Washington a long time. That's Home Team Sports. It was a local sports channel when I first moved here to DC. So trying to make that shift to whatever it's supposed to stand for in Arabic or whatever is a little bit of a difficulty.
I also want to emphasize for our older listeners, HTS is not the K-pop group that your granddaughter keeps talking about. That's BTS. It's just another TLA, 3-letter acronym.
Even I'm clueless on that one. I guess I'm older than I realized. But yes, hopefully there's reason for optimism here. I'll give you more reason for optimism. That's Open Phone. Today's fast-moving world, your team needs to stay connected to your customers without missed messages, communication silos, or slow phone systems. A flexible and efficient business phone system isn't just nice to have, it's essential to succeed. What's perfect for this? Open Phone.
Open Phone is the #1 business phone system that streamlines and scales your customer communications. It works through an app on your phone or computer, so there's no more carrying 2 phones or using a landline. With Open Phone, your team can share one number and collaborate on customer calls and texts like a shared inbox. That way, any teammate can pick up right where the last person left off, keeping response times faster than ever.
Open Phone is now offering 3 Martini Lunch listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/3ML. That's OPENPHONE.com/3ML. And if you have existing numbers with another service, Open Phone will port them over at no extra charge. Open Phone, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now, and it's the gift that keeps on giving, the drip, drip, drip of revelations of Joe Biden's obvious cognitive decline that just only happened to come out after the debate. And we've gotten a lot of nuggets. We talked about a couple of them yesterday from Biden's inner circle, saying if he stayed in the race and won in 2024, would he need a wheelchair? Would that be okay to get him around in a second term? There was also the really upper staff lying to the lower staff, trying to hide Biden's condition. Well, now we've got George Clooney. That's one of the latest revelations that came out yesterday from, I guess this is the Tapper and Thompson book. But again, the idea that Jake Tapper is trying to be the guy trumpeting this.
The hero of the story.
The hero of the story. It's just ridiculous.
Look what I found, America.
So anyway, remember the LA, I think this is the LA fundraiser that was just a few days before the debate. And here's how the excerpt in the book goes. You know, George, the assisting aide told the president, gently reminding him who was in front of him. Yeah, the president said to one of the most recognizable men in the world, the host of this lucrative fundraiser. Thank you for being here. Hi, Mr. President, Clooney said. How are you? The president replied. How was your trip? Clooney asked. It was fine, the president said. It seemed clear that the president had not recognized Clooney. It was not okay, recalled the Hollywood VIP who had witnessed this moment. That thing, the moment where you recognize someone you know, especially famous person who's doing a bleeping fundraiser for you, it was delayed. It was uncomfortable. George Clooney, the aide clarified for the president. Oh, yeah, Biden said. Hey, George. Clooney was shaken to his core. The president hadn't recognized him, a man he had known for years. Clooney had expressed concern about Biden's health before, not to us. A White House aide had told him a few months before that they were working on getting the president to take longer steps when he walked. But obviously the problem went far beyond his gait. This was much graver. So, Jim, Republicans are having fun with this, is that George Clooney wasn't bothered enough by his previous interactions to say anything publicly, or to anybody else for that matter. It was only when somebody didn't recognize him that his ego was a bit dinged that he decided to have a big problem with this. But obviously, if this did happen, allegedly Biden and Clooney have been friends of some sort for well over a decade. So it's another sign that Biden was cognitively in free fall, which we had obviously known for a long time. So what do you make of this latest nugget?
Before I dive into my answer, Greg, I just want to share with listeners that I think it is an absolute crying shame that you have perfected your Joe Biden impression right here we are in mid-2025 when we know we're not going to hear from Joe Biden very often. So right as we no longer need it, we have nailed it. So just put it up along the shelf alongside your Al Gore impression of being really good and not able to be used all that often. So I thought, because people might be like, Jim and Greg, don't you get tired of, talking about Biden being senile? But each new anecdote does illuminate it in a new and really disturbing way. And like, you mentioned, so according to that article, Biden and Clooney met in 2001 and have been interacting regularly since 2006. Right. So besides the fact that he's George Clooney, he's a very famous, movie star. They interacted a whole bunch. And this comes on top of the claims, apparently also in the Tapper book, that Biden stopped being able to recognize and the names, knowing the names of his cabinet officials. And I suspect that listeners remember that one of the last interviews he did before he withdrew from the race, in BET, he referred to Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin as the black guy, which is, all this is bad. If he doesn't know who he's talking to, if he does not recognize his people, he should not have been president of the United States. And that, like it's been fascinating. I've been reading this, or we have this article. The Tapper book isn't out, it comes out next week. I've read the Parnes and Jonathan Allen book, Fight, and I have Chris Whipple's book, and I'm working through that one too. So I kind of, out of professional obligation, I'm just like, all right, so now it can be told. Tell me all the stories. And what's fascinating is you keep hearing Democrats saying, oh my goodness, we're going to lose the election. How is he going to win the election? No one's saying, what happens if China attacks tomorrow, right? What happens if, we're at DEFCON 1, there's an incoming IC, what is Biden going to do? And it's just kind of baffling, but the fact that, we had seen the pictures of all of the name tags in the cabinet meetings, all of them facing Biden, and that seemed weird. It just seemed weird. Like, usually you're facing out, and it now seems very clear. This was to remind Joe Biden who he was talking to and the names of the people he was talking to in his cabinet. At age 81, the mind was gone. He was not in any condition to be president of the United States. But so all of this happens at this fundraiser, and everybody's freaking out. Like, oh my God, he was president for another 7 months and 8 days. We should be thanking our lucky stars and God that there was no serious foreign policy or domestic crisis, for that matter, that Joe Biden needed to react very quickly to. Go read the transcripts of the national security meetings and the cabinet meetings during the Cuban Missile Crisis. John F. Kennedy had to operate with very little sleep for like a 2-week stretch. How do you think Joe Biden would have operated with something like that? Like, that's why this really matters. And the fascinating thing is, even today, it sounds like, like the headline on the New Yorker piece of the excerpt of the Jake Tapper, Alex Thompson book was how Joe Biden handed the presidency to Donald Trump. And I'm sure if you're a Democrat, that's a really bad consequence. But I still think a worse consequence should be the president was senile. Like, how we are, what would have happened if he had actually needed to respond to a crisis in a quick manner, and it was after 8 p.m. in an evening? You need to be president 24/7. Hillary Clinton ran the ads about the 3 a.m. phone call against Barack Obama. We had a president who was maybe working 30 hours a week.
I got 3 thoughts that are rattling around in my head real quick. First of all, it's pretty obvious Biden will not be in Ocean's 14 for a couple of reasons. Number one, Clooney's ego is bruised. Biden did not recognize him. Yeah. Secondly, if he was on the plot, he'd be wandering around the casino floor going, hey, I'm with the guy who's trying to break into your vault. Do you know where he went? Secondly, what I think we're going to get in this book, based on what we've seen from the excerpts, is a bunch of people still off the record. They're still so weaselly. Right? It's going to be sources close to the deputy secretary of state or something. It's going to be very, very vague, and nobody's still going on the record actually putting their name on it because they still want to have a job in Democratic politics, which is still their number one goal. But Jim, you remember that we talked about this. A lot of people were talking about this fundraiser at the time because as they were exiting the stage, Biden seemed to freeze, didn't know where to go. Obama had to kind of tap his wrist or elbow or whatever and kind of lead him off. Hey, we're going this way to go off the stage. And so people are saying Biden has lost it. Again, he's not sure where he's going. We see this all the time. And here's another example of it. And what did we get from Obama himself on social media, from everybody else saying, no, you guys are making this up. You're reading way too much into this.
Cheap fakes.
Then we got cheap fakes. Exactly. They said that was a cheap fake. They said Biden wandering off to look at the parachutist in Italy was a cheap fake. Here's Brian Stelter after that fundraiser on CNN.
The White House press secretary used the phrase cheap fakes, the idea of cheap fakes. Let me explain what that is to people. We've been worried for years about AI deep fakes, that computer-generated images are going to trick people into believing something that's totally false. Cheap fakes are a little bit simpler. They're cheap. They're just distorted, out-of-context videos, chopped up in certain ways, constructed in certain ways. That's what we're seeing. That's what the Biden administration, the Biden campaign is so worried about right now. But make no mistake, they are worried about this. This is a real problem. This is not some made-up fiction. The videos are oftentimes made up, but the problem is real.
The problem is the videos, Jim, not the fact that Biden has lost and can't even find his way off stage. So even after evidence piling up, they're trying to skate away from it now. But it was obvious then they were just, Biden's our nominee. We got to do whatever it takes to get him over the finish line.
Stelter is on camera on a split screen saying the videos are fake. While on the other half of the screen, you can see Biden shuffling his feet and kind of waving, and Obama, like the whole body language of that was weird. Why would Barack Obama have to go up on the stage and kind of lead him? What was going on? Or the other video that had gone around where he had kind of just frozen and stood there while everybody around him was dancing at some event at the White House.
Oh, yeah.
Right? These are not, in the end, no, these are not cheap fakes. And Karine Jean-Pierre was lying to you and saying that they were cheap fakes. But on the other hand, we almost she's White House press secretary. She's paid to lie. Her job is to tell you 2 + 2 = 5 that the president just said it's 2 + 2 = 5. Brian Stelter, what's your excuse? Because you're not getting paid by as far as we know. Right? Your job, allegedly, is the media report. And by the way, Brian Stelter, likes a bunch of the stuff that I say on Twitter and will repost it every now and then. And Greg, that makes me very uncomfortable. It's very nice of you, Brian. Thank you. But from the bottom of my heart, please stop helping. Please, there's nothing you can do to hurt my reputation more than to be saying I'm doing a good job. Please criticize me. Please say I'm some sort of unfair right-wing hack or something. I desperately need the credibility. No. But I look at that and I'm like, dude, what are you saying? Come on. We have eyes. So.
Jim, quite a day. We'll do it again tomorrow. See you then.
See you tomorrow, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch if you don't already. Tell your friends about us as well. We'd love to have them listening. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Wednesday. Join us again on Thursday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.